expert care from people who care. Hello, today we are here at the Outreach Teen and Family Service Office. We're your podcast hosts, Jackie and Gina, and we are here today with Jordan Miller. Welcome.
Thank you both for having me. I'm so excited.
Thanks for coming.
Today we're going to be discussing men's mental health from the lens of Jordan Miller.
So we're going to first start with 5 questions just to get to know you a little bit, start to transition into our topic. So first, do you consider yourself more of an introvert or an extrovert?
That's a good question. I'm going to take the easy route here, and I would say I'm an introverted extrovert. And what I mean by that is when I have to show up and I have to be on, I will be very extroverted.
Yes.
And we'll be able to get along and kind of carry the conversation. But I think like mentally it does take a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So when I'm in those situations and I'm being extroverted, I then need time to kind of like just decompress and like, then I don't want to talk to anybody. So I need like time to just sit back.
The social battery runs out.
Yes.
Sometimes it's quicker than others, but it does.
Yes.
So yes, I would say I'm an introverted extrovert.
Yes, I would agree. I totally understand that.
Me as well. Yeah. Alongside that, are you more outward or inward about your emotions?
Again, going to kind of straddle both lines here. I promise I won't do that the whole time.
It's fine.
I think very early in my mental health journey, it was, and I think it's interesting that we're talking about men's mental health. I think like it is just kind of put on men more to kind of keep it inside. You don't want to kind of share that, we're supposed to be tough. You're not supposed to cry, these types of things. So I feel like early in my mental health journey, I was very inward with everything. And then actually found that just by keeping it in, it gets worse.
Yeah.
And then recently over the last couple years, I've been more wanting to be able to share it, not only to try to help others, but it just makes me feel better.
Yeah.
And then you kind of see that a lot of people go through similar things and
For sure.
you find people that you're able to like bounce things off of. So.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
So kind of going off of that, how have you learned in your journey how to advocate for your own mental health and also for other people's mental health?
I find it easier advocating for other people's mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just from a human nature standpoint, right? I think it's just easier to kind of say like, oh, I see Gina going through it. Like, Gina, take time. Like you need it. Take time for yourself.
Yeah.
Jackie, you too. But then when it comes to our own, selves, we're like, oh no, like if I take time to like, I find it easier it's easier for other people and for me to let other people know that it's okay to rest. But then when it comes to my own, I find it a lot more difficult, but I realize that you have to.
Yeah.
And some smart people have told me that take a couple times a day to do things that matter to you.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to kind of be on for some of those more activities that you kind of have to show up for.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sure.
Alongside that, do you make any lifestyle choices to build a more positive mindset?
I think, so a couple I think are just trying to stay active, trying to stay fit. I find, the more active I am, the better I ultimately feel. I want to eat healthy. I really do. And
don't we all?
I feel like I'm good at it like 40% of the time.
Yeah.
Like you think this like cheeseburger is going to make you feel good, and then you have it, then you're like, no, that probably, it has the opposite effect.
Yeah.
But so I think like working out, like just eating healthier, kind of back to that last point of doing things that are intrinsically valuable to you.
Yeah.
So things you love doing, again, it helps you show up better for those have to do type of activities. And then I think just having support around me and just like, I think hanging out with people who are good people.
Yeah.
The better people you put around you, I think ultimately the better you feel. So just honestly, just spending time with people who are good people, care about me, care about others. And I've seen that kind of rub off in those things.
That.
So I would say those are some of the choices
that
I've made. Yeah.
And then lastly, our last little question. So I don't know if you know this, but June is Men's Mental Health Month. So what are ways that you can spread awareness during this month, or maybe that you have spread awareness during this month?
I think just, so I think ways that I know that I could share is just being more open with my story. And I think this was important for me to be able to have this opportunity to come on a podcast like this, because this is something I've wanted to be more outward with, is just like my story and some of that. So I think just kind of ending that stigma of feeling like we can't talk about it.
Yeah.
And then I think just being an advocate for others. So like if somebody does bring up something that they're worried about, like being open to receiving that, and just being open to giving them the space that they need, and those types of things. So I think just the more we talk about it, the more we allow others to feel like it's okay to bring that up and have that space, I think is important. I know there's always more that we can do, but I think it starts with just sharing our own stories and kind of going from there.
Yeah, I like it.
Mm-hmm. We would like to pause and thank St. Clair Health for being our annual sponsor for the 3rd year of our podcast.
At St. Clair Health, we're always improving, building on our commitment to face the challenges of today, making an impact on the communities we serve, so we can be stronger together. St. Clair Health, expert care from people who care.
So, getting into the first half of our episode, we kind of just wanted to first define mental health from a male's perspective. So our first question is just that. How do you personally define mental health?
So I guess I would define it as mental health would be, to me, just it could be good and bad, right? So we can have periods of really good mental health, not so good mental health. I think it's just the state of mind that we're in the moment.
Yeah.
And it can fluctuate and it can change from moment to moment. So I think it's this kind of ever evolving, ever changing kind of state. And I think the more we can be okay with knowing that it's going to change, and we don't have to always feel great, and it's okay to not feel great. And I think to kind of limit that perfectionism type of thing, I don't know if that's a great definition. That's definitely not going to be found in Webster's anytime soon. But
I like it. Yeah.
But I think it is just this, the mental state that we're in currently, and trying to stay in the moment and just be okay with whatever it is that we're feeling.
I like it. Good answer.
Going off of that, do you think there's any stigmatization around mental health, specifically like in broad terms, and then also from like a male perspective?
Yeah, I do. I think it's something that most people are trying to understand, and I think that obviously I'm not going to throw out any percentages or that, but I would say that most people are impacted by mental health, whether it's their own, whether it's somebody they love, it's a friend, it's a colleague, a family member. It's like I feel like it's something that everybody's impacted with at some point.
Absolutely.
So I think there is this stigma on it, though, and I think it just comes from this place of, well, it's not going to happen to me, or this, and whether it's like, I think for me in my journey, it was, wait, is this actually mental health, or like, am I actually suffering from something, or do I just not have things together?
Yeah.
And I think for the longest time, I think like I just was, like, it's fine. Like, this is what everybody thinks, or maybe this, and I think just as I've gone through things, I've realized that, okay, well, there is a rhyme and there is a reason to it. So I think the more that we just try to understand the different types of mental health issues, and that it's not going to look the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Because I think they're, me who suffers from OCD, it's not going to look the same for me as it does for somebody else that suffers from it. So I think just understanding that mental health is very, it's a very broad thing, and it can show up differently for everybody. So I think there is that stigma on that end.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as you've talked about before too, like talking about it more allows you to realize, oh, this isn't something that I am only experiencing. So kind of going off of that, would you be more comfortable discussing your physical health in a social setting, or like over your mental health, or do you think they're equally comfortable now and maybe in the past as well?
Honestly, I actually, in a way, I actually find it less personal.
Okay.
This is probably gonna be not what you were expecting, but I actually find it less personal and easier to talk about my mental health.
Okay.
than if I go in
interesting.
and, oh, I went to the doctor because I was experiencing, chest pain, or I don't know, like, and maybe it was just the way that I was kind of brought up. I think it goes back to the men's stigma, I guess, is like my dad like never went to the doctor, like just didn't go, and it was just like, oh, and his logic was, if something's wrong, like, do I really want to know anyways? Like, and I think like that is sometimes how men can be. So I didn't grow up where he was talking about a lot of things that were wrong. So I actually find it easier to kind of share my mental side than I do like, oh, like physically I went to the doctor because this was bothering me or something like that.
Okay.
You probably weren't expecting that answer.
No. But it was a happy plot twist. That's okay.
But I guess I would say that probably most people are better or feel it's easier to share physically than it would be mentally.
Why do you think that people view physical and mental health very differently?
I think it goes back to that stigma a little bit. I think it's just like people don't. It's the brain is so interesting, right? And it's just you can't even define it in a sense. And I think it's just, okay, well, if something physically happens to me, well, it wasn't my fault, right? If not, I guess you could say it is, right? If you don't eat a healthy diet and you get diabetes, I guess you could point and say, well, if I would have eaten, but I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, it's hereditary that we get heart disease, or it's hereditary that we have diabetes in our family, or those types of things. Maybe it's a thyroid issue or whatever. So I think people can point to, oh, it's genetic. Where I think although mental health is genetic as well, I think people are more like, well, I guess they blame it on themselves more. I think it's easier to blame, or it's easier for people to kind of say, oh, no, you're just letting stuff get to you. You need to handle it better. Or and it's like, I want to, trust me. But I just think there's that genetic piece to like physical health that people can kind of lean on and say, I had no control over this. Where mental health, I think there's that misunderstanding that we have control over it. Because I didn't ask for OCD and I don't want it. But there's nothing I can do. And then the more I learned about it, you actually find out that it is genetic as well.
And I think that's also because of the stigma, people aren't looking into the research that's done on mental health and things like that. It's less common than you just be like, oh, let me look up on Google, like, what's going on with, like, my ankle, or why am I feeling this way, Whereas, like, mental health, like, I think that's less common to feel comfortable to just, like, search that up and, like, feel confident in the answer you're given.
I think that's so interesting, kind of what you said there, because I guess physical health, oh, if my ankle hurts, or if you break your arm or break you put a cast on, or you get surgery and it's better. And you just don't have that fix with mental health.
For sure.
You can be better for periods of time or feel better. And like we talked about earlier, that state of mind, it can switch in an instant, and there's just no fix. So I think people can bring up their physical health because they know maybe there's something that's going to ultimately fix it or heal it.
And so I guess we've kind of touched on this in different terms, but why is it so important to acknowledge that mental health to your friends, to other people, and even for yourself, acknowledging?
I think it, number one, makes you feel better. I think the more we kind of put it out there and find a safe space to kind of share what we're going through, it's ultimately going to make us feel better. Friends who I've been really close with for years, I started to bring up, my mental health and kind of some stuff that I've struggled with, and all of a sudden they're sharing stuff to me about how they struggle with something similar, and they're taking medication as well. And I would have never thought that. And these are some of my closest friends. And so I think, again, number one, it helps us when we share it. Number two, I think you're opening up an avenue for people close to you, or maybe somebody that you just interact with on a daily basis. Maybe they're not your friend. They're just a colleague or somebody that you're around. It opens up an avenue for them to share what they're going through as well. So I think it's just important. And it goes back to that point of the more that we talk about something,
Mm-hmm.
the more normalized it becomes.
For sure.
And I do think, so I'm 32.
Okay.
And I think my generation and even
Mhm.
younger generations, I think, are more open
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
to the different types of mental health that people
Yeah.
suffer from, and
Mhm.
having a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, even though there is that stigma out there, just kind of
Mhm.
trying to break down those walls and continue to share no matter what.
Yeah. And that's what it takes.
Mm-hmm. Adjacent to that, you'd mentioned your friends and family. We have like a little fun fact. But the top 5 male mental health issues are depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar, and substance use disorder. Do you know anyone struggling with one or any of these disorders?
I do. Yeah, I was actually very not. I don't want to say I'm surprised to hear that those are the top 5,
Mhm.
but I do know a couple people that suffer from
Yeah,
one
right.
of those at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's tough,
Mhm.
you know.
But I think that shows like how common they are, because everyone
Right.
knows at least one person that's affected by one of these issues. Or
100%.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so communication is known for being one of the most successful tools in a healthy relationship, friendship. So how does this importance of communication translate into the realm of mental health in your friendships, in your relationships?
Yeah, communications and that's part of what I do for a living, is around
Mhm.
like communication and good communication. And I
Yeah.
think it's just important to be able to share and feel comfortable sharing when we're not being our best selves.
Yeah.
Of course.
And what I've learned from personal relationships and romantic relationships and those types of things is, we're not going to be on 100%.
Yeah.
And when you find somebody that allows you for it to be okay to not be at 100% all the time,
Mhm.
I think communicating that, I think, is very, very important.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of where that stigma, I think, comes in. I think some of it's okay, because I think if you asked anybody, hey, if a friend or a parent or a partner or whoever, if they're not 100% every day, is that okay? I think everybody would be like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
that's normal.
Yeah.
But then if we ask ourselves, like, hey, is it okay if I'm just not here in this moment?
Yep.
Most people are going to be like, no, I need to be better.
Yeah.
And we may know that, but I think just communicating through, hey, like, I don't have my A game today.
Yeah.
I need to work through some things.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's doing it together or whether that's just giving space for that person to be able to do that, I think is important. And it all starts with just, I think, being honest and allowing people to be honest and not judging them for what they're kind of going through.
Yep, exactly.
We would like to pause and thank St. Clair Health for their generosity in sponsoring the 3rd season of Teens Tap In.
At St. Clair Health, we're always improving, building on our commitment to face the challenges of today, making an impact on the communities we serve so we can be stronger together by creating reliable resources that recognize all of our neighbors, with access to the highest quality healthcare, advanced care close to home, and a shared humanity that delivers on our joint vision to create a healthier community for all. St. Clair Health, expert care from people who care.
So, transitioning more into your personal experiences, we wanted to start out with a question. So, I'm going to make you think back a little bit. So, when was the first time you heard the phrase man up? Like, how do you perceive that? And how old were you when you started to experience those societal pressures to behave in a manly way?
Kind of probably a generalized answer here. Not going to obviously probably remember the exact
of course.
moment, but I mean, I would say it was from a very young age.
Yeah.
I would say probably when you start playing, I started playing sports when I was 4, but I would say that's probably where it first showed up.
Yeah.
Is you get hurt playing basketball or baseball, or you scrape your arm, like, be tough. You're a guy, like, rub some dirt on it, like, you're going to be fine. Like, don't cry. Like, it's sad to say, but they'll be like, oh, girls cry.
Yep.
You know, like those types of just general, like, so yeah, I would say from the moment, you know, you're able to honestly kind of start remembering those, I mean, I think society, unfortunately, they pin that on us at a very, very young age, 4, 5, 6 years old. And that's when your brain's growing and you take that in and you think it's, oh yeah, that's like, you know, that, oh, these are adults. Like they know everything, right? Like, oh, that should be how, and then when you become an adult, you're like, wow, wait, they really didn't have all the answers. Oh my gosh. Because I certainly don't have all the answers. But yeah, from a very young age. And I wouldn't even say it was necessarily like my parents that were that way. I mean, I think there probably were moments where they were like, oh, you're fine. Like, you know, but sometimes it's from other coaches or other people who are in your life. And I think that's what's kind of tough is sometimes you don't even get it from the people that are most closely around you. Sometimes it comes from outside influences that,
that are still equally important to
you. Yeah.
As you've mentioned, outside forces and everything, how would you say that you conformed with societal pressures? And then also, how did you balance these pressures internally and then also externally as well?
I would say I definitely conformed to just that idea of you just have to push through. Like there's no time to sit here and sulk. There's no time to feel bad for yourself. You have to be tough. You have to work through it. Which there are cases where you do have to do that. But I think it was that thing of, oh, you can't show weakness. You have to be tough. And I think that's probably where I conformed the most. And I think, you know, I guess I would be lying if I said that I guess I would be lying if I said that every time somebody brought something to me mentally or outwardly that I was probably accepting to it.
Yeah.
I can't say that I've probably done that. I've probably had friends bring things to me and I probably said, oh, you're making too big a deal out of this. Like you need to just get over it or like be tougher. Like we got to be tougher, you know? So I think that's probably where I conformed the most, I would say, is just really kind of giving into that, like, men can't feel this way. Yeah.
And so how do you think that those pressures and the stigma around men's mental health has affected you and your mental health journey specifically?
Yeah, I think, honestly, not, you know, as I trace back my mental health journey and as I started going to therapy and talking with somebody, I was able to trace back, you know, OCD thoughts and ideas to 5 years old. Yeah. 4 and 5 years old. And I didn't start seeing a therapist until I was in college. So I was probably 21.
Yeah.
And even then it was just in college and I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
And I just remember the therapist kind of sitting there talking to me like, hey, like you would be considered to have OCD. I can't diagnose you, but I think that's what you have.
Yeah.
So I wasn't even officially like diagnosed at that time. And then I didn't see a therapist for years after that. And unfortunately had a friend pass away and then started going to therapy again, which is where I was still not officially diagnosed, but it was more around grief than it was OCD specifically. And, you know, fast forward to 28 years old, 29 years old, I started seeing another therapist. There was breaks in there for years where I didn't see anybody. And finally had the courage to go to somebody that could diagnose it officially. And honestly, that was one of the happiest days of my life in a weird way, because it all made sense.
Yep.
All of those things officially made sense. Like, oh my gosh, like all these thoughts that I've had are for this reason. Like I knew it, but until I heard it, it just didn't make sense. So I think to back to your question was, how did this play a factor, is for all those years, I felt like I can just get through this myself.
Yeah.
I don't need somebody else. I can't show this weakness. I can't bring myself to admit that I have this.
Yeah.
And I wish now that I would have just been like, hey, like I'm going to go to therapy. Like, these are the things that I'm going to do, and it's just going to help. And I look at, I don't want to say the years are wasted, because I don't know if things would have gotten as bad as they did if I would have actually made that jump to go to therapy and to start that journey again in my late 20s. So everything happens for a reason, but you do look back and you're like, oh, wow, I wish I would have started going in high school. I wish I would have started doing those things earlier, because I think it would have had a bigger impact on me and some of the relationships that I've built and have had that, you know, I always didn't feel that I showed up the way that I should.
For sure.
We've mentioned previously in podcasts before about the startup to go to therapy is always the hardest transition. And so the fact that it took you that long, you're not alone. Most people take that time as well.
Yeah.
And since you've identified, you know, what is around your mental health, what are some tools you use now to help with that?
Some tools that I use are I guess, weekly therapy.
Yeah.
Weekly therapy, bi-weekly therapy, it kind of varies in there depending on how. Another kind of, I guess it would be a stigma around mental health that I even, I guess this can go back to that conformed part, was I didn't want to take medicine.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it for the longest time. And I was like, okay, just going to therapy, I think this can help. And what I learned through my journey is that there are different types of mental health issues that we deal with that do work better with therapy and medicine. And OCD happens to be one of those. So I think when I was able to kind of tear some of my walls down and start not only the therapy journey again, but then to be okay with taking medicine, that was a big day for me. So those were, I think, two really, really big things. I guess third would be some of the books that I've read around mental health. There was one that I really loved. This isn't, I'm not getting paid to
not a paid sponsor.
Not a sponsor. But it's called Brain Lock, and it's around OCD, and it changed my life. It really did. So I think just like being able to read and understand what other people go through, I think has been a valuable tool. You know, I guess if I had to kind of say like what I've learned in therapy is just to be in the moment. And anybody that's gone to therapy, probably you know that you know that saying, be in the moment. And I think just understanding that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to have bad days. Where I think being able to use the tools and resources that I had to be able to flip that mindset of like, hey, if I had a really, really bad day today, like it's just Monday. Like I can wake up tomorrow and Tuesday could be a better day. And not having to, I guess in a way to put it is, it's okay to take one step forward and one step back. Like that's okay. As long as the next day we try to take that step forward again. So I think just using those tools and resources to, and I guess if I had to pick, the two big ones were therapy and, you know, the medicine from that standpoint, but then just having books and a better understanding, I guess, around resources like that. And a lot of that came from therapy because I didn't know where to look.
For sure.
And having a therapist that can give you that guidance and kind of start you down that track, I think is really, really important. So yeah.
And I think as you were talking about the medication, it made me think about our conversation earlier where like if you had injured your ankle and your doctor was like, oh yeah, just take some ibuprofen, ice it, whatever, you wouldn't even question it. But it makes it seem so much more big and apparent whenever you're faced with that decision, like, oh, do I need to take this medication? When in reality, you know, we do that all the time to help ourselves feel better.
We never question that doctor when they're like, oh yeah, you should take this. We're like, okay. I don't know what I'm putting in my body, but okay, this seems like it's going to work.
For sure. So just a general last question for you. What is some advice or guidance you would give to a man who may be struggling with their mental health?
I think the first part is that it's okay. And that it's not your fault. That there are things that you can't control. And I think the the moment we realize that this isn't something that we asked for, this is just something that we're faced with, and that other people are facing similar issues and challenges as well, that we're not alone. I think that really helps to kind of switch our perspective, and that we can all work together. And I think too, just kind of going back to that earlier point of, you don't have to win every day. I think, or every day from a bigger perspective, but you don't have to win every hour. And I think sometimes when whether it's going, you'll kind of hear those things of like, just win the hour, and I think if you lose an hour, like, hey, that's okay. If you lose the day, that's okay. Because honestly, and not to sound like too corny with it, but if you keep showing up, like, that's a win. And I think just like for all the men out there, like, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel bad. It's okay to not show up with our A game. So I think just that idea of we're not alone and it's not our fault, I think is really important.
Love it.
Lastly, this podcast would not be possible without the support of St. Clair Health. Please listen to the following ad.
At St. Clair Health, we're always improving, building on our commitment to face the challenges of today, making an impact on the communities we serve, so we can be stronger together. St. Clair Health, expert care from people who care.
Thank you to Jordan and to all of our listeners for your support. We are still looking to recruit 2 more members to join the Outreach College crew this spring. So if you are interested in joining us, please complete the OCC application, which can be found on our website under Programs tab, or you can reach out directly to Outreach's Program Manager, Maggie Zangara. Reach out with episode ideas or feedback at podcasts with an S at outreachteen.org. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
The views and opinions expressed in the Teens Tap In podcast represent the opinions of the hosts and their guests. The views and opinions expressed by Outreach Teen and Family Services employees, donors, and volunteers are their own and do not necessarily reflect the view of Outreach Teen and Family Services or the show's sponsors. The content here should not be taken as counseling advice. The content here is for informational purposes only, and because each person is unique, please consult your mental health provider or physician for any mental health counseling or other medical questions. The podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including, but not limited to, establishing a standard of care in a legal sense, or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast. If you find any error in any of the content of the podcast, please contact us at podcasts@outreachteen.org. Outreach Teen and Family Services, its sponsors, donors, and partners expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages whatsoever arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, reliance on, or inability to use this podcast or the information presented in this podcast. Please go to www.outreachteen.org to see the complete notice and disclaimer for the podcast episodes.